so much. When Nacho was doing his sound, I thought for sure that it was right off. I had my earpiece in, and when he mentioned that people are motivated by music, I am that person. And I thought for sure that you guys were doing another one, Bites to Dust, because that was in my ear from Bohemian Rhapsody. So I thought for sure that was what you were doing, but then quickly caught that that was not the case. One thing about me that you're going to notice right off is I am definitely the square peg in that round hole compared to the rest of these people. And I actually embrace that because it's in my part of my journey that has been able to see things a different way. So you see here an image of a cage. I'm going to mention it throughout my talk today because I believe that we all experience the same feeling that many of these people in these images feel. I know that the cage resonates with many of us. I refer to the cage because it is something that we all experience that holds us back. It's confining. It represents shame, obligation, the inability to speak for yourself, and in my case, that I had no voice. In order for you to understand where I'm going with the cage, you have to understand a little bit of my backstory. I am from a small town in northern Utah with a population of about 3,500. I assure you there's no stoplight there. There still is not today. My mom and dad moved to this small town because my father accepted a high school football position at the local high school. But the day that he was to coach his first game, he was given the news that he had multiple sclerosis, a neurological debilitating disease that would digress pretty quickly in his life. At first, he decided to not tell his employers about this disease. He didn't realize that it would go so quickly, and so he thought by not relaying it that he would be able to hide it. But unfortunately, due to the side effects of the disease, it presented very quickly, and it was not very long until his fellow colleagues, teachers, his students, and then his players realized what was going on. So he faced the obstacle of telling the school board and just hoping for the best. So as he went to the school board, they realized very quickly that they couldn't dismiss someone for disabilities due to legal reasons. I believe they would have, had they not had the legalities involved. Throughout the years, as the disease digressed, he went really quickly from crutches to a cane to a wheelchair. He was such a vain human being. In order to understand who was driving the bus in his head, it was most definitely ego and pride. So you can imagine what this disease did for him. It was all that he could do to just not combust. But he was destined to beat the odds. He was determined he was going to do this. And in the meantime, he built a tribe of young men that had hearts of lions. Whenever they would go up against an opponent, they were always the smallest in stature, but always the biggest at heart. Every opponent that went up against them knew they were someone to be reckoned with. They were a direct reflection of their coach. Most of the time, you could find him tethered to the 50-yard line by a folding chair, or in a golf cart that one of his players' fathers made for him that was hand-operated. Throughout the years, he sent many kids to college on collegiate, athletic, and academic scholarships. His difference made national headlines. NFL Films came to him and said that they wanted to make a biography on his life. It would be shown during Thanksgiving, during the bowl games, for all of the television viewers to watch. This is what they showed is when he won the state championship, and this is them giving him that award. There is a picture that's in my office of President Ronald Reagan, Nancy Reagan, Frank Sinatra, and my father. He was awarded an award called the Father of the Year, someone that made a difference in many people's lives. For my view, I was on this side, and I was watching my sister eat all of the jelly beans off of his desk. Quickly after that, we looked to the side, and a kid locked his knees during this, and he just passed out and hit the corner of the desk. So quickly, things changed. But one of the things that I loved is that you don't see here is my picture has a picture of President Reagan holding up a number 40 Morgan Trojan football jersey. It seemed fitting since President Reagan was the 40th president, and he was thrilled. Well, my dad will always be one of my greatest heroes, always. But in order to understand that, you have to realize that multiple sclerosis was an additional member of our family, and the personality and the dysfunction that came with that. My inability to relate with other people was difficult. I was primarily surrounded by adults and high school kids, and my day-to-day responsibilities exceeded that most of what most adults do every single day. My thought process was I wasn't worried about a ponytail holder slipping. I wasn't worried about barrettes, and I definitely wasn't worried about my 5th grade popularity. But there was a place in the back of my mind that I didn't understand why kids wouldn't play with me. All I could really offer them was a ride in the golf cart. So shortly after that, my father lost his his speech diminished. And he had to step down from being a football coach after 20 years of coaching. I watched as he had no voice, no ability, and now the passion that he sought for his entire life had been taken away. Watching this play out, along with a traumatic incident that happened when I was 15 years old that I'm not able to mention, left me feeling that I had no voice and completely helpless at what was happening in my life. I had no say in what was going on. This started my lifelong addiction of control. Sadly, at the age of 41, my father lost his battle with multiple sclerosis. It was 1 month after I graduated high school. My life forever changed that day. I was no longer able to look at things or people the same. I had no trust. I had the inability to make relationships. And this theory that people had of an almighty God was no more than a fairy tale to me. Because when we're young, we're given this idea that if you pray long enough, if you're good enough, much like Santa Claus, you will get what you want. That was not the case for me. And God no longer served a purpose for me. I established a series of behavioral patterns that helped ease that lack of control. But the more that I tried to control the outside world, the more that I seemed very much out of control. So when that happens, you just control the things you can control. So I started to exercise incessantly. I started to control my diet. I developed a conspiracy theory that everyone around me was sabotaging my success. I thought that people were putting fatty oils in my food, and I would check it with a napkin to make sure that no one had messed with my food. It was my only way to control what was going on around me. I headed face first into an extreme eating disorder. And for well over a decade, I binged and purged. And after my first child was born, she had a very low birth weight of 5 pounds, 3 ounces. And you would think that that would be enough for me to stop. And it wasn't. So, through all of my children, I still had this same condition. Until one day I promised that I would not do that anymore. However, you have to understand with an eating disorder that no matter what the scale relays, whether you're 40 pounds overweight or 20 pounds underweight, your inability to establish that relationship with food is no different than you trying to establish your relationship with anybody else. You think it's your enemy, and I thought everyone around me was as well, including my family and my husband. What I didn't mention is that I was married at 19 with the same belief theory that I've mentioned before. I all but asked him to sign a contract to neither leave or die, which is very difficult to uphold when you have no control over the future. He still never signed that contract. So I stopped the actions, but the verbiage in my head continued, and the self-deprecating story continued. It always continued. In fact, it had become a lifelong friend. I was empowered by it, the control that I had. And I know that it was my voice that I wanted to be heard, and I wanted to hear myself, but I couldn't do it. No matter what I tried, I had no peace. So I did all the things that the people do when they have no voice. They provide it for someone else. I was the biggest cheerleader for the underdog. I was, the biggest cheer in a stadium. I was an employee for the state of Utah as a CASA for the Guardian ad litem. I adopted a little boy that I was sure to save my soul. He did. But it was then that I needed to seek something else. I worked many years for family practice, and I had my nutrition degree, and found myself at a very difficult point in my life. I was overweight, and my ability to go back to what I needed to do as far as what I thought in my mind would push me back into binging and purging. And I thought about my weight and my appearance 1 in every 3 thoughts, just like any other addict. So I sought a colleague that could help me. I had a real candid conversation with him. I had journals of concrete evidence of what I thought would be a good way to deal with my disease. The problem is that whenever you get lab tests done, they are very ambiguous. There's a huge pendulum swing. They don't take into consideration any independent or individual factors. It just gives you a number, and then this huge range, and then you fall within that, then I'm sorry, I can't help you. And I fought against that. I talked to this colleague. He actually heard me. And for the first time in my life, I actually believed that something I said would initiate my healing. With that, I started to live my life with a balanced intention. I exercised for joy rather than for punishment. I started to build concrete relationships that helped me. I had the desire to lift rather than to crush. Everything seemed to be working in the direction of releasing me from that cage. I could see it. I could see my freedom. But I still was very unsettled because of the triggers that control brings. Anytime that I couldn't control something, or I felt helpless, or there was something that was out of the ordinary, it would push me right back to the back of that cage. So I decided to put Western medicine aside. I decided to take a walk on the spiritual side. I need to clarify really quickly. Spirituality and religion are not the same. This was a spiritual journey. I spoke with people that had no dialogue. They spoke directly to my heart. And they wanted to tell me what my heart wanted me to say. In an individual artistic rendition of what my heart's desire was, I found the answer was very simple. It was love thyself unconditionally. At first, I was irritated with the answer because my Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz moment was to love yourself unconditionally. What in the actual hell was that? I mean, I literally, okay. But it was after I took a minute to really process the information that it actually started to make sense to me. So I had to do something that literally sounded crazy to me. I stood in front of the mirror and I said, I love you, Rachel Barker. I love you, Rachel Barker. I will not leave you and I will not die. I said it until my heart believed what I said. It was then that I took the key and locked the cage and I stepped out. I know that in this day and age that we all have a cage that is there that holds us back. And the key is not always that simple. I had a wonderful family. I had a husband who loved me. I have 5 beautiful children, 2 wonderful son-in-laws, and this year I joined the most fabulous group that there is, the Grandma Club. And once I was able to realize and recognize when the triggers came, I was able to stand really close to the cage, but I didn't go back in. And I know a lot of people face the same things that I do with a funner diagnosis as anxiety or depression. But I'm not telling you that all of these things go away. I could tell you right now, all of my carpet lines are going in the same direction. I can control that. I can promise you that most of the time, it's ready for a photo shoot. However, I have a little boy that I adopted who didn't get the memo. All of my other kids are conditioned to act accordingly. And he could get an axle. He doesn't care. He just looks at me like, well, what's your problem? It seems like a personal problem to me. So if you can leave with one thing today, and I could share with you my amount of advice, I believe it is crucial that you live a cage-free life. Because around us, in the chaos that we live in, so many people want to put you in there. And you're one of those people. So I have a reminder that reminds me every single day to live cage-free. It's difficult. The triggers are still there. And it is my opinion, and I know that I'm amongst many MDs in this room, that to say that I've overcome my eating disorder, that would be a damn lie. But I do know what those triggers look like. I know how they speak to me, and I know it's a bully that I can face. Because that's all it is. It's a bully that wants you to feel what the ego wants you to feel. And I've shut him up. But he comes back sometimes. And you have to just be really strong in saying, not today. I'm not going to do it today. And so if I could encourage you to do one thing in your life, live cage-free. Because in my story, love really was the answer. Thank you.